There, we're recording. All right, you guys ready? You guys ready online? All right, today is Sunday, April 23rd, 2023, and this is my little Bible study, the Sunday night edition. That means we're in the book of Genesis, chapter 17, if I remember where we were. Okay, let's talk about last week. All right, last week, Abraham, we finally started to build some nations, right? Abraham had the promise given to him, you know, to have the promised land, the land of Canaan, with him and his descendants forever to be a possession, right? Started in the chapter before that. Well, Sarai, of course, who's quite a bit older by the time, you know, all this is going on, she knows about the promise made to Abraham, but yet she decides what she wants to do is to send her handmaid in as a wife for Abraham, all right, which she does. Now, this causes some problems because once Hagar becomes pregnant, then she begins to lord this over her boss, basically her mistress, which is Sarai, right? Well, Sarai complains to Abraham, and Abraham says, "Well, you're the boss, and deal with her, how you should, right?" Well, so that continues on. The thing about that I want to bring out is this kid that comes out of this relationship's name is Ishmael, right? Now, Ishmael inherits the promise made to Abraham. The promise was to be a father of many nations. Ishmael is one of the sons of Abraham, the first son of Abraham before even Isaac. All right? Now, so what do you have there with Sarah? Sarah's trying to kind of go around what God's plan was with her own plan. And it causes some problems, but God kind of works it out, right? Well, then you have Sarah comes into it. So we want to pick it up here, chapter 17. Now we've had the birth of Ishmael, all right? We're going to pick it up in chapter 17 where we start talking about circumcision, all right? We'll talk a little bit about it as we go. All right, chapter 17, verse 1. And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abraham and said unto him, I am the Almighty God, walk before me and be thou perfect. All right, now, a lot of people try to tell you Moses is the only prophet that God actually appeared to you, but here God appeared to Abraham too as well. He's one of them, all right? Now, keep this in mind, he's already had one appearance with him already. It was Melchizedek, right? Where he tied to Abraham himself. Or Abraham himself tied to Melchizedek, right? All right, what I want you to get at is Abraham's becoming familiar with what God looks like physically anyway. Let's just put it that way. And I want to kind of keep that in mind. Verse 2, and I will make my covenant between me and thee, and I will multiply thee exceedingly. Verse 3, and Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, as for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. All right, and neither shall thy name be any more called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham, for a father of many nations have I made thee. Okay, so what's God done here? He's taken Abram, and he's added an H to Abram, right? All right. Here's where you can get some understanding about what this H means. In Hebrew, in ancient Hebrew, there is no numbering system, right? There is no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth, all right? But each letter is then, out of the letters up 0 through 9, all right, are assigned by the character value in the alphabet. First letter's number 1, second letter's number 2, third letter's number 3. Right? Well, H is number 5. Now, in biblical numerics, 5 means grace. So, what's that mean? He's taken the promise to Abram to be the father of many nations, and he's added grace to it. All right? This, I think, points toward the Christian covenant, but that's just what I think. But that's nonetheless what 5 means in biblical numerics, is grace. So, just kind of keep that in mind. It all has some significance. It's going to do the same thing in Sarai. So that changes, think about what we're having here. We're having the beginnings of Israel being established here, right, with Abraham and then his descendants, right? Ishmael was born. Then his name is changed to Abraham, which adds grace. And then through this lineage then comes the Messiah himself, right? Where, what you say, the Messiah didn't come to judge, but to save mankind, right? So through grace, you'll see being born through that lineage itself. That will be born from the Messiah coming through the tribes of Israel itself, which is what this leads up to, because Isaac's the next son born. and then Jacob, and then all the patriarchs, right? All right. So that's the meaning of the H being added to Abraham and Sarah. All right, 6. I will make thee exceedingly fruitful. I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee, especially the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. All right, remember, this is the whole point from protecting this lineage all the way back in the Garden of Eden, remember? All right, so that the Messiah would actually come through this lineage, and this continues right along with it. But not the one with Abraham and Hagar, but the lineage that comes between Abraham and Sarah, right, through Isaac. Verse 8, and I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land whereon thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. It will be, I will be their God. Verse 9, and God said unto Abraham, thou shalt keep my covenant before thee, thou and thy seed after thee in their generations. This is my covenant, which ye shall keep between me and you, and thy seed after you. Every man child among you shall be circumcised. Okay, so here we have the circumcision covenant coming in. Now, we've talked a little bit about circumcision before, right? And for me, the pragmatic approach toward circumcision, there's a practical reason for it. Cleanliness is part of it, all right? But like I've said before, I think this has as much to do with anything, and cleanliness has as much to do with the women that were having children with these men understood exactly who they were. There was no question that these came out of those brothers, out of the ones that circumcised, right, from Abraham's seed. All right, that's my opinion. All right, and then that's all that is. Everybody has one of those. But that is my opinion about it. Now, we're bearing that in mind. With the Christian covenant, though, all the blood ordinances have been lifted, right? So circumcision is not a part of the Christian covenant, but it was a part of the old one. I've heard a very good argument made that after you recognize the tribes of Israel and that you're born as a part of them, that perhaps then maybe circumcision would apply again. But that's still, again, an opinion, and I've just heard that before. Every Christian preacher that you were going to find is going to tell you that it's lifted, right? And I agree with that. It's part of the blood rituals that are no more. With that being said, what did he say? He said, every man child among you shall be circumcised. Listen to what he goes on in verse 11. And you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it should be a token, right? What? A token of the covenant betwixt me and you. Just one about being part of the nation building of the world. He that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man-child in your generation. He that is born in your house, or he that is bought for money of a stranger, which is not thy seed, he that is born in thy house, and he that is bought with money, must needs be circumcised. Of my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. That's everlasting. Okay. Now, this is where I stand on circumcision, again, because this is the only place you're going to get to form your own opinion about it. Okay? Where I stand with it is this not a part of the religious part of your life, of our life. But for some reason, as a group, as a people, we, for the most part, continued this. Okay? I would ask you why. If it's not considered to be a part of the religion that we profess, but yet we continue to do it, why is that? My personal opinion is I think it's because of what he said. So this is an everlasting covenant. Now, it's not important to go to heaven, for sure. But I kind of think that as a part of Israel, as a part of those lost tribes, that maybe that is one of the ways that you're identified, all right? And we continue to circumcise even though there's no need for it. My sons are all circumcised, and if I have any more, they'll be circumcised. That's just, yeah, that's right. But like I said, it's not a requirement as part of your religion anymore, because it's been lifted. But let's say you have to make up your own. When you have children, you'll have to sit there and make that decision, because they'll look at you and they'll say, well, you have a little boy, do you want him circumcised or not? All right? For generations, it seems like we've continued to do so. So much so that even many of them went back and become circumcised as adults later. All right. So, like I said, that's neither here nor there. It has nothing to do with your future. It has nothing to do with whether you attain heaven or not. but it's just some food for thought. Kind of ties you a little bit to the history of it all too, when you think about it in those sense. And the uncircumcised child, this is the last verse concerning circumcision, and the uncircumcised man whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that shall be cut off from his people. He hath broken my covenant. Now, where you want to fall on that's up to you. Okay, now it didn't say anything about being put to death. He's just cut off from his people. Now, in that case, if he would have been cut off then and then be later circumcised, then he'd be back in the fold. That's part of it. But that need for religious purity is completely covered under the Christian covenant. So that's that. Okay, now, verse 15. Now we're going to switch a little bit. And God said unto Abraham, as for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. Again, adding H, or that number 5, the period of grace to Sarah and to Abraham. All right, that becomes significant because Isaac is going to be the one in whom the seed is called, and then Jacob and his sons are all, the patriarchs, and we're going to get to them as we go. Verse 16. And I will, and I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations, and kings of peoples shall be of her. Right? So we have the same promise made to both Sarah and to Abraham. All right? And we see that fulfilled, then of course, with the nation of Israel and the 12 tribes. Verse 17. Then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed and said in his heart, shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old, and shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear? All right. Now listen to what he's just said. Now let's think about this. Sarah's 90 years old. A woman only has children between the ages of, say, 13 and 50. All right, right? Somewhere, yeah. Right, because there's so many eggs. Well, according to this, it's probably been 30 years since Sarah's even had a period. Okay? Now, if that word offends you, will go away.
That's crazy.
All right? Now, so think of what he's saying. And Abraham, look how old I am. And she's not even been able to capable of having children for over 30 years, really, when you do the math on that. All right? So what it says, and Abraham said unto God, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. He's like saying, look, you promised me, but look, I have a son. His name is Ishmael. All right? So Abraham's banking on Ishmael. All right? Listen to what it says. And God said, Sarai thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed. All right? And thou shalt call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. All right, so now we're continuing with God's original plan. Okay, 20. And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. All right, so that was his prayer. Consider Ishmael. He's my son. Right. He's just praying for his kids, right? That's what every man does that. Of course they pray for their children. All right, and here he's telling them, no, you're going to have another one. All right. And as for Ishmael, I've heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful. Right? He's one of Abraham's sons, just like he promised. And will multiply him exceedingly. Listen to this. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. All right? That sounds a lot like the promise made when we get to Israel. Well, the 12 princes. Well, this first son, he gets 12 princes too, just like Isaac's going to. All right? And I think that's he's going to make a great nation of him. Listen, we're going to get some clues into who these people actually are. And my covenant will I establish with Isaac and with Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. And he left off talking with him, and God went up from before Abraham. And Abraham took, listen to what it says. And remember, he just told him to do this with everybody in your household, right? And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the selfsame day. And God had, as God had said unto him. And Abraham was 90 years old and 9, so he's 99 years old, and he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. So Abraham 99 and Ishmael 13, right? In the selfsame day was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son, and all the men of his house, born in the house, and bought with money of a stranger, were circumcised with him, just as God had said for him to do. Okay, now here's where you get your clues as to who these people are. All right. Because we have a group of people that are half Egyptian. It was Hagar, she was Egyptian, right? Half out of the tribes, or half out of Hebrew, let's call them, because Hebrews already been born. They started to call them the Hebrews even back then, right, through Adam's lineage, make up a certain people. Now, these people live in the Middle East where they do. Now, most Islamic people, I think the Shia circumcised males, but it's like, for us, like baptism is a purification rite. For them, it's the same thing. It's something that they would do as a purification rite. It's not something they do at birth. All right. But there is a group who consists of about 12 princes when you break them all the way down, all right, that lives in the Middle East, it's their own nation, their own independent country, extremely wealthy, called Saudi Arabia. All right. Now they circumcise their males as a right, just like Ishmael and Abraham. As a matter of fact, they're ones of the problems that say, yeah, we do. We circumcise the 13-year-old just like it, all right? So that's one of the markers for these people. Now, you got to remember something, all right? Ishmael and Isaac is next, all right? Now, because of Isaac's birth, Ishmael and his mother get separated from Abraham, which we're going to find out, all right? So there's some animosity then could be between the children of Abraham through Isaac's side and the children of Abraham through Ishmael's side. Think about this. When we were attacked on 9/11, most of the perpetrators of the attack were from where? Saudi Arabia. So maybe some of these grudges from way back in the day, because the only thing these people don't forget. They remember. They know their history. They know their biblical history. They know their historical regional history. They don't forget. So there's a whole bunch to this when you get to thinking about it. So Ishmael's still doing his thing out there. Still have sons of Jacob still running around out there, and they still have a conflict. If you remember, he said back in there that he's going to multiply them, but you're always going to stand opposite your brother. And Saudi Arabia is exactly that way. Yeah. Extremely wealthy, always kind of standoffish, just exactly like he says. But nonetheless, that's neither here nor there. But there you go. These things are still, we're nation building. We're talking about things that will be. And this ain't the last time we're going to talk about who's who, because you're going to find all the rest of them are there too. If you watch the news from the nightly news now, you're going to find out that these boogers, everything, all these people are still movers and shakers in what's going on in the world today.
Is that the only
so they're the only ones moving around, right? And it's something we really have to be aware of as we continue. Particularly when we start trying to see how the Bible pertains to the last days, because these attitudes and things are still there. Now, when we get to Abraham's death and burial, you're going to find out that Isaac and Ishmael, when they bury their daddy, they get along just fine. There's no evidence anyway that there was any kind of an issue, but who knows what that really means. But that always is stuck in my head. When they buried their dad, they didn't have any problem with each other. So maybe in the end, that all means something. Only thing I know for sure is we'll see. All right, but that finishes chapter 17. Let's see what time. Well, we're doing pretty good on time. Let's go on 18 then. And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. All right, so this is the next year. All right, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground. All right, so he went up and he bows to them. Now, I told you earlier, he's starting to recognize what God looks like. This is the second time that he's had a face-to-face with God. So here, he's starting to recognize him. He's got a couple angels with him, but he doesn't actually recognize who he is. So when he sees him come running, he's excited. He knows this is God that's blessed him and blessed his seed. All right, so he presents himself. And he said, verse 3, "My Lord, If now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, for my servant. Let a little water, I pray ye, be fed, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under a tree. All right, let's sit down and relax a bit. All right. And I'll fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts, and after that you shall pass on, and therefore are we come to you, to your servants. And they said, so do as thou hast said. And Abraham hastened into the tent unto Sarah and said, make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. And Abraham ran and ran unto the herd and fetched the calf tender and good and gave it to a young man, and he hastened to dress it. So they went ahead and they just knocked out something to eat. All right. Now, they weren't playing around. Right. Now, you got to realize what's going on. You have people in spiritual bodies here having a meal with people in flesh bodies, and they're all consuming the same food. Okay? All right. So that tells you a little bit about how close an angelic body is to a flesh body, at least as far as the way it's powered anyway. They can consume the same food. We've already talked about in the book of Exodus how God fed the children of Israel manna, angels' food. Right? So the same food that powers an angelic being can power a flesh being, so vice versa works just the same. So you actually see them here sitting down having a meal that's being prepared. All right? And he took butter and milk and the calf which he had dressed and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. And they said unto him, where is Sarah thy wife? And he said, behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. Now, people want to talk about this, kind of skirt this, I think. Appointed time is what a lot of people will want to go with this. But what did he just tell him? He's going to return to him the time of life. She's what, 90 years old? Been 30 years since she's had a period, right? Time of life for a woman is between 13 and about 50 when she stops having her period. So he's returning to her the ability to have children. Okay? And lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door, which was behind her. Now Abraham and Sarah were old and were well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of woman, like we're talking about. All right? And therefore Sarah laughed within herself. So she didn't even, this is not even an outside laugh. She didn't scoff openly. She just thought in her own mind and laughed. This is kind of a crazy idea. All right? Saying, after I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? 13, and the Lord said unto Abraham, wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I surely bear a child, which I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? Question. Now, I mean, think about that question. God formed the universe. All right? He formed everything about us. All right? In the natural realm and in the spiritual realm. All right? So is anything actually too hard for him? No, not really. Especially to return the time of life to an older woman. All right? And Sarah denied, saying, I laugh not. Well, she didn't out loud, remember, but it was inside. And she was afraid and said, nay, but thou didst laugh, right? He knows she laughed, but she's denying it, right? Well, because she's scared. And it would be, you stand there having a face-to-face with God, you could be, I'm sure it's not a light thing. Abraham understood full well who he was talking to. And so did Sarah. And a man rose up from thence and looked towards Sodom. And Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? All right, now, what he'd come here to do was destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. All right? But he was telling Abraham, I'm not going to hide from you what I've came here to do. All right? Now, who's in Sodom? You remember who's in Sodom already? It was Lot. It was his brother's sons in Sodom with his family, and all of them that Abraham had already rescued from the kings of the plain of Shinar and the king of nations, titled the king of nations and all them, right? So he knows full well Lot's in Sodom. So does God. You got to remember, Lot kind of ends up in his spot because he pitched his tents towards Sodom. He made a choice. He's the one that wanted to go there. So you kind of bear that in mind. So some of this stuff that Lot suffers is due to his own blindness. And for the same desires of those things that they're finding in Sodom and Gomorrah. Seeing that Abraham shall surely become great and multiply, a mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord and do the just and the judgment, or the justice and the judgment. And the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken unto him. And the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down and see what they are, whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is coming to me. And if not, I will know. So he's going, look, I'm just going to go down just like he did at the Tower of Babel, right? So I'm going to go down and just see what they're doing. And he's saying the same thing about Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, that should tell you something about God. He doesn't really pass judgment unless he comes and sees himself what's going on. He's not relying on secondhand information. He's checking it out himself to understand. All right? Where are we at? All right, let's go just a little bit more. 22. And the men turned their faces from thence and went towards Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And Abraham drew nigh and said, wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? See, Abraham's trying to play. He knows Lot's there. He's trying. Remember how Moses kind of played God's heartstrings when he come out? I'm going to kill all of them, Moses, and start with you. And he said, yeah, you could do that. But then the rest of the people are going to look around and say, well, he was mighty enough to deliver them from Egypt, but he wasn't mighty enough to keep them alive in the desert. So Moses was kind of playing the heartstrings with God to keep him from killing his people and starting over with his own seed. Could you have done that, pass on that? I mean, think about what he just offered Moses. He's like, I'll kill all these people and I'll make Israel out of you. It'll be your descendants that inherit all this. And Moses said, no. But instead, he talked God down from killing them. Well, here you got Abraham, I think, probably trying to kind of do the same thing. He knows he's already told him he's come here to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and he knows Lot's in there. He's saying, well, you're going to destroy all the righteous people with the wicked ones, are you? You know? So he's kind of playing a thin line right here. Peradventure, all right, perhaps, there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? All right. That be far from thee to do that after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked. All right. Is that like you, to kill the righteous with all the wicked, kill the wicked, or righteous with all the wicked? And the righteous should be as the wicked that be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? And the Lord said, if in Sodom there be 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the places for their sake. So if you find 50 people out of that mess, I'll spare all of it. All right, so we know what happens. And Abraham answered and said, behold, now I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord, which am but dust and ashes. Peradventure, there shall lack 5 of the 50 righteous. Wilt thou destroy all the city for lack of 5? And he said, if thou find 40 and 5, I will not destroy it. All right. And he spake unto him yet again and said, peradventure, there shall be found 40 there. Then he said, I will not destroy it for the 40's sake. I mean, think about that, what Christ would go on and say. He said, if he has 99 of his lambs and one out of them goes astray, he'll leave the 99 and go get the one. All right? So he's kind of playing on all that because he understands God's heart. At least Abraham does, right? And he said unto him, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Peradventure there shall be 30 be found there. And he said, I will not do it if thou find 30 there. And he said, and behold, now I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord. All right, so he knows he's pushing it. All right, even Abraham's like, all right, I'm really pushing it. All right, and he said, Peradventure, if there shall be 20 found there, and he said, I will not destroy it for 20's sake. And he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet, but this once. One more time. Peradventure, 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for the 10's sake. So we got it all the way from 50 down to 10. When I go buy a car, I want to take Abraham with me. And the Lord went his way, and as soon as he had left, come look at Abraham, and Abraham returned into his place. Okay, so here we have the setup for destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. All right, so he's got it whittled all the way down to 10. If he can find 10 people that are righteous inside of Sodom and Gomorrah, 10 people, all right, that he'll spare it. And we probably all know how this goes, but we're going to stop there tonight. Next week we'll pick it up with destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in chapter, where we're going to be, chapter 19, right? Yes. God rescues Lot. All right. So that's where we'll be on starting next week, all right? I'm getting kind of tired too, and I start stuttering when I get tired. It gets worse. But anyway, so here we go. We'll see you guys next week then. You have a good night.